1943. World War III. Europe is ablaze. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the planet, in Brazil, several men were detained while attempting to rob a Brazilian museum. During interrogation, they quickly identified all the Germans transported to South America by a secret SS military intelligence vessel, the yacht Passim. What do the Nazis want in a Brazilian museum? All the captured Germans are members of the Ahnenerbe order. The Ahnenerbe, based on German ancestral heritage, was formally created to study the traditions, history, and heritage of the German race. Its founders were the leaders of the Third Reich. Himmler, like other members of the Third Reich's leadership, was obsessed with mysticism and the occult. He sought to create an entirely new religion that would replace Christianity in Germany. The true goal was to prove that the first Germans were godlike beings, from whom the Germans themselves later traced their history. Thus, the Ahnenerbe's mission was to rewrite history to confirm this unscientific hypothesis and give it a semblance of credibility. Countless archaeologists, ethnographers, and philologists were involved in the organization's activities. They produced pseudo-historical films and engaged in propaganda. Ahnenerbe actively searched for the lost city of Atlantis across the globe. They sought the Holy Grail, studied Tibetan scriptures, and searched for the Spear of Destiny. So what were the Ahnenerbe members looking for in the Brazilian museum? When the Germans were searched, they found what they had so genuinely tried to steal from the other side of the planet. It was a crystal skull, one of 13 ancient Ma skulls, pieces crafted from a single piece of crystal by ancient peoples. How they did it, no one knows. But many speak of the power stored within the skulls. Have you ever felt such a strange feeling of emptiness? It's as if there's some missing detail in life. As if there's a hole. The Mayan civilization is renowned for many things: architecture, art, mathematics, astronomy, but there are questions that remain unanswered. The Mayan civilization was in deep decline by the time the conquistadors arrived. The Mayans built enormous stone cities, but by the time the Europeans arrived, these cities had long been abandoned. The Mayans were well versed in astronomy. They observed the stars. They created their own astronomical calendar, and they precisely defined a year as having 365 days. How an ancient people could so accurately determine the length of a year simply by observing the sky is unclear. Moreover, it is claimed that the Mayan civilization did not have a wheel. The Mayans possessed astonishing scientific knowledge. They predicted earthquakes. They had excellent medicine. They knew how to remove tumors. They healed broken limbs and were extremely clean. The Mayans built gigantic pyramids. It's not entirely clear why, and most importantly, how. When Europeans first set foot on the continent, they found barbarians. This was no longer the same civilization that built the majestic pyramids. And the heirs of the Mayans, it seems, have long since lost track of where these cities came from. How the Mayan civilization died out is also not entirely clear. They simply vanished. There are many opinions. Some say they killed each other off in endless wars. Others say they died of starvation. Both are possible, but no physical evidence has been found. You know, according to a survey, a third of Russians, a third, 1 in 3, make life decisions based on horoscopes. So, an ancient civilization on another part of the planet, which existed, how many? 3,000 years ago. They drew a map of the starry sky. They mastered astronomy to perfection. And now, 3,000 years later, people still believe in astrology. (1924), an expedition by renowned English archaeologist and explorer Albert Mitchell Hedges. The humid tropical jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula, then British Honduras, now Belize. Explorers stumble upon some ancient structures and overgrown vegetation in the jungle. They don't yet understand the historical significance of their finds. To facilitate excavations, they decide to simply burn the forest, which has engulfed everything around it. And when the smoke finally cleared, the expedition members were met with an astonishing sight. 33 hectares of forest concealed the stone ruins of pyramids, city walls, and a huge amphitheater for thousands of spectators. This is the city of Luba Antun, the city of fallen stones, the city of the ancient Mayans who lived here, and suddenly disappeared. 3 years passed, and Mitchell Hedges took his young daughter Anna on another expedition. She had just turned 17. The excavation director had no idea she would make the biggest discovery. In April 1927, Anna was climbing ancient pyramids. When she reached the top of one, she claimed to see a light through a crack in the pyramid. The sun shimmered strangely and was reflected in something. Anna informed her father, and the researchers spent a month and a half drilling a hole in the top of the pyramid. When they did, they lowered young Anna down on ropes. The problem was, she was the only one who could fit through the crack. Thus, the archaeologist's young daughter found herself inside a pyramid no one had entered for several thousand years. Anna crawled inside, and beneath the rubble and the dust near an ancient altar, she discovered a remarkable object. It was a life-size, perfectly polished human skull made of transparent quartz. It weighed 5 kilograms, measured 124 millimeters in width, 147 millimeters in height, and 197 millimeters in length. Its lower jaw was missing, but 3 months later, literally 8 meters from where the skull had lain, it was found. It turned out that this crystal piece hung on perfectly smooth hinges and moved at the slightest touch. An astonishing sight. Thus was discovered the first of the 13 skulls of Marius. An ancient artifact that fits in no way with human history. All 13 skulls are said to possess amazing powers. Moreover, all 13 skulls are connected by a single legend. The Mayans believed that the world had been destroyed 4 times. The first time, giants lived here. They were washed away by a great flood. The people who populated the earth for the second time were attacked by a kite. Only 2 survived, a man and a woman. The third time, civilization was destroyed by fire. The fourth time, humanity was destroyed by famine. We now live under the 5th sun. The god Kukulkan, the winged serpent, is one of the supreme gods of Mayan mythology. He is the one who gave fire, earth, water, and air. He gave people 13 crystal skulls, and 13 guardian priests could penetrate any secrets of the universe using the Darakulkan. Such is the sinister myth. The legend of the first skull continues. It was taken to Britain, and they say that strange things happened to those who touched it. This first happened to Anna herself, the daughter of the archaeologist who discovered the skull. One evening, she placed the amazing find next to her bed before going to bed, went to sleep, and all night, she claimed, she had very strange dreams. When she woke up in the morning, Anna could describe in detail everything she saw: strange images, people in ancient, brightly colored attire, voices in an unknown language, cruel sacrifices. At first, she didn't connect these dreams with the skull, but strange ones continued to haunt the girl every time the crystal skull was placed near her headboard. And each time, they revealed new details about the lives of ancient peoples, including some previously unknown to scientists. Conspiracy theories are generally very helpful in dealing with stress, because scientists conducted a study and found that people who had recently experienced some kind of traumatic experience were more likely to believe in conspiracy theories. Or maybe it's much deeper, I don't know. Summer 1739. East Prussia. Employees of the Saxon Library were conducting an inventory of its main repository of antiquities. Suddenly, among the books, they discovered a strange manuscript. It wasn't listed anywhere, and there was no inscription on the cover. This document was carefully folded like an accordion, and when unfolded, it was a thin strip of parchment 3.5 meters long. This manuscript contained 74 pages measuring 20 by 10 centimeters. Each page contained mysterious drawings and symbols, incomprehensible lines, circles, squares, and some dancing figures, as well as scenes of the apocalypse, interstellar, and space travel. A note in English was found next to the manuscript. I tried in vain to decipher the secret signs of the ancient Indians. May you try? Upon seeing the book, the experts could not believe their eyes. Before them lay a document from the year 50, parchment written by Mayan priests. Only 4 handwritten books of the Mayan Indians have survived to this day. 3 of them have been translated. They are devoted to medicine, architecture, and astronomy. And the last, 4th book, found in Prussia, is encrypted. It is called the Dresden Codex. To this day, the world's best cryptographers are trying to decipher what was written on those scrolls. The oldest known Mayan manuscript was probably created in the 10th centuries. A significant portion of the text consists of astronomical tables, compiled with great precision. They include calculations for the full cycle of the Moon and Venus, tables of lunar eclipses, and ritual schedules in accordance with the movements of celestial bodies. Despite enormous advances in research, the Mayan written tradition remains poorly understood. Science still doesn't know 25% of all written symbols. Where did the skull come from? Who made it, and how was it made? How could it have been created without modern technology? In the early 1960s, after her father's death, Anna decided to hand the skull over to specialists for examination. It was incredibly perfect. Art historian Frank Dortland was the first to study the skull. Upon careful examination, he discovered a complete system of lenses, prisms, and channels creating unusual optical effects. The researcher was amazed that even under a microscope, the perfectly polished crystal showed no signs of processing. He decided to consult with the renowned firm Hewlett-Packard, which at the time specialized in the production of quartz oscillators. This company was considered the most authoritative in quartz examination. The results of the examination surprised more than just Frank. Research conducted in 1964 in Hewlett-Packard's laboratory showed that the skull had been crafted long before the first civilizations appeared in this part of America. Furthermore, rock crystal of such quality is not found in these parts. And what's more, it gets even more interesting. The entire skull is made from a single piece of crystal. The lower jaw, too, is also made from a single piece. One of the company's experts said, "We studied the skull along 3 optical axes and found that it consists of 3 or 4 intergrowths. Rock crystal has a high hardness of 7, and it is impossible to cut it with anything except diamond. But the ancients somehow managed to process it, And not only the skull itself. They cut the lower jaw and the hinges on which it hangs from the same piece. With such a hardness of the material, this is more than mysterious. We also discovered some kind of prism cut into the back of the skull from the very base, so that any ray of light entering the eye sockets is reflected in them. Look into its eye sockets, and you can see the whole room in them. His colleagues agree with the expert's opinion. In order for the skull not to crumble during processing, the most precise analytical methods were needed. The cuts had to be strictly oriented relative to the growth axis of the crystal. It was as if the creators of the skull had molded it. Against the law, the thing simply shouldn't exist. Those who created it don't have the slightest idea about crystallography or fiber optics. They completely ignored the axes of symmetry, and this thing was bound to fall apart during initial processing. It's impossible to imagine why this didn't happen. However, the fact remains. The skull is reality. Now it's in the Museum of the American Indian, and anyone can look into its eyes. Historians and ethnographers, interested in the finds, began searching for anything that could shed any light on the skull. And soon the first traces and mentions of skulls were found in ancient Native American writings. There were 13 crystal skulls of the goddess of death. They were kept separately from each other under the watchful eye of priests and special warriors. And most importantly, there were 13 skulls. Subsequently, similar skulls were found not only in Mexico, Brazil, and the USA, but also in France, Mongolia, and even Tibet. Most of the skulls looked much cruder. It seems they were later and less than skillful forgeries, attempts to recreate skulls gifted to humans by the gods. In the late 1940s, Alberto Russ, the head of a Mexican archaeological expedition from the National Institute of Anthropology and History, while selecting a site for future excavations, drew attention to the so-called Temple of Inscriptions. This structure was virtually unexplored at the time. While examining the chamber at the top of the pyramid, Russ noticed that the floor of this three-room building, unlike other temples, was composed of large stone slabs. Examining the slab, Russ noticed that the temple walls extended below the floor, which most likely indicated that there were rooms below. They decided to lift the slab, and they were right. Beneath it, they discovered the entrance to a long tunnel. Stone steps led into complete darkness. At the very beginning, the archaeologists found a cache of ritual offerings in the form of 2 jade rings, which served as ear ornaments among the ancient Mayans. Another offering lay at the foot of the stairs in a special stone box. A necklace of jade buza, large shells filled with red dye, clay vases, and a huge pearl measuring 13 millimeters in diameter were found. The researchers continued deeper into the tunnel. Descending in complete darkness toward the center of the pyramid, they came to a huge stone door. Near the door, at the entrance, lay 6 skeletons, 5 male, 1 female. All had died violent deaths. The artificially deformed foreheads of the skulls and traces of inlay on the teeth indicate that these were not slaves, but members of noble families. Apparently, they were sacrificed for some important and solemn occasion. On June 15, 1952, archaeologists finally managed to open the door. Archaeologist Russ himself has recorded the first steps into the room, which had been uninhabited for several thousand years. From the thick darkness, a fairy tale scene of a fantastic, unearthly world suddenly emerged. It seemed like a large, magical grotto. Carved out of ice, its walls sparkled and shimmered like snow crystals in the sun. It was a tomb of incredible beauty. In the center of the chamber was a sarcophagus, carved from a single stone block. The entire surface of the sarcophagus was covered in relief texts and paintings. The lid of the sarcophagus was a huge stone slab weighing approximately 5 tons. Archaeologists opened the sarcophagus. Inside lay a leader. His face was covered with a jade mask. His name, Pokal, comes from the Mayan word for shield. Episodes from his life are painted on the walls. The find is of incredible archaeological and historical value. Episodes from the life of the Pokal are depicted on the walls of the tomb, and even a little about the daily life of the Mayan civilization. But the main topic of controversy surrounding Pokal's tomb is the drawing depicted on the slab. Here it is. Many researchers say they see in this drawing the Pokal controlling some kind of mechanism. Some say it's a flying machine, and the slab depicts a detailed cross-sectional drawing of a spacecraft, with a jet stream even visible at its bottom. American aircraft designer John Sanderson fed a reproduction of the slab's design into a computer, converted the flat image into three-dimensional form, and created a cockpit, complete with instrument panel and propulsion system. Researchers are still debating what's depicted on the tomb. Take a close look and decide for yourself. One of the crystal skull researchers, Frank Joseph, wondered whether Mitchell Hedges' first skull had a prototype and what its owner would have looked like. A New York police lab specializing in facial reconstruction from skulls set to work and recreated a portrait of a man with such a skull shape. During the search, another intriguing detail was unexpectedly revealed. It turned out that skulls are of interest not only to historians. Some secret societies were also hunting for them, literally from under their noses. A so-called rose quartz has disappeared without a trace among archaeologists in Honduras. It also had a removable lower jaw, and the investigation revealed that before its disappearance, priests of some secret cult had attempted to steal it several times. Apparently, the last attempt was successful. Regarding recreating a person's appearance from a skull, firstly, it's rather strange to recreate a person's appearance from a skull that was made. It doesn't matter who made it, it doesn't matter when it was sculpted. Secondly, in addition to the police team, a second group, a group of psychics, was tasked with recreating the person's appearance. And for some reason, the article writes, "Wow, how is that possible? The two portraits are very similar." There's probably nothing more to add. This is John Park. In the 70s, a great tragedy befell their family. Their 12-year-old daughter was dying of bone cancer. The parents tried almost everything and sought salvation in all areas. They were unable to save their daughter. But before his death, the father became closely involved with Tibetan medicine. In 1973, I met a Tibetan healer named Narbuchan. From him, my father learned about a skull, a sacred relic that could heal illnesses. According to the healer, the skull was found in Guatemala in 1924 in an ancient Mayan tomb. And in 1970, a shaman from Mexico gave it as a gift to Chin. Before his death in 1977, Chin gave the skull to the Parks with the words, "Take this and someday you will understand what you need it for." John Park put the skull in a closet and forgot about its existence for decades. In June of 1987, she was watching television. There was a program about crystal skulls. And only then did she realize what artifact was kept in her closet. She refused to give the skull to the museum. Currently, she travels around the United States, giving interviews and speaking on television. For some reason, this skull has the name Max. I thought, why does this skull have a name? I googled it and it turned out that this woman was telling everyone a story about how one day a skull spoke to her. She got scared, threw it away, and it said, "It's okay, my name is Max." Quote. (1994) Colorado, USA. A rancher is riding a horse around her property when she suddenly sees some shiny object in the tall grass. The woman gets off her horse, goes up to this object and sees, perhaps, the most unusual thing in her life. It was a human skull made of transparent crystal or glass, but of a very unusual shape. It was crumpled and twisted as if it was very plastic before hardening, as if it was twisted under enormous heat at the moment of creation. This is how, perhaps, the most unusual of the crystal skulls was found. Where it came from and why it looks like this remains a mystery to this day. The Sumerians are the first civilization on Earth. The Sumerians are an ancient people who once lived in the territory of modern Iraq. These people appeared in the south of Mesopotamia in the middle of the 3rd millennium BC. It is unknown where from. And now the Sumerians are called the ancestors of modern civilization. They were the first civilization known to us, founded 5,000 years BC. They invented the wheel, the potter's wheel, wheeled transport, musical instruments. They created writing, mathematics, the plow, worked with copper, smelted metal, and also built pyramids. During excavations, archaeologists discovered 30,000 clay tablets. And in the 20th century, these tablets began to be translated. There was everything: medical texts, government correspondence, and 7 more tablets called Ein Yuma Elish. Apparently, they are religious tablets indicating the beliefs of the Sumerians. They talk about powerful beings from the sky. They said that their entire civilization was possible only thanks to the gods from the sky. In the 14th year, Erwin Finkel published a translation of a 3,700-year-old tablet. In it is said that the gods Anunnaki created humans to spread wisdom on Earth. The gods created man in their own image and likeness. And there is also a description of the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh. Enlil, the king of the gods, begins a war with his brother Enki, the creator of humans. Enki wants humanity to develop. Enlil opposes this. The 2 god brothers fight, and Enlil sends a great flood to destroy all people. Enki tries to save humanity. He chooses one person and orders him to build an ark. I heard that somewhere. It turned out that something similar to what Anna experienced when she slept next to the crystal skull was experienced by researchers of another British crystal skull. Many claim that the skulls induce an almost hypnotic state. It is accompanied by unusual smells, sounds, vivid visual hallucinations. Strange visions from the distant past. Some saw the skulls glow and fill with white fog. Then mysterious images of people, mountains, forests, temples appeared in it. Some say that this is the memory of the crystal skull. Everything it saw. The revelation of people who experienced such a mystical experience from contact with the skull forced the historian to take a closer look at ancient legends. They discovered a strange ritual associated with these skulls. 13 priests in different places were supposed to simultaneously peer into their skulls. Legend has it that in this way, the priests could see any secrets. Not only what was happening in other places, but also the past and the future. And legends also say that they could see in the skulls the day of the return of the gods, including Kukulkan himself, the white-skinned, bearded god of the planet Venus, who once, in a time of complete darkness, descended from the heavens to people. He gave the Indians knowledge, writing, mathematics, astronomy, taught them to build cities, use the calendar, and grow rich harvests. Art historian Frank Dortland claimed that his employees for 7 those who worked with the skull for years saw many things in it. Other skulls, bony fingers, stones, distorted faces, and mountains. Moreover, he said that while working with the skull, he often heard mysterious sounds, the ringing of silver bells. Quiet but distinct voices of people singing strange songs in an incomprehensible language. He even said that one day he brought the skull home and that night he and his wife woke up to a growling sound coming from the skull. That is, you take the skull, look into the eyes, and there you see some kind of information or connect with other civilizations, like a TV. Joshua Shapiro reports another crystal skull. In 1990, in Las Vegas, he met a man named Hossein Deekes. He said that in his youth, he found a crystal skull in the ruins of an ancient Mayan city. Strange symbols were carved on the skull. He kept the find all his life, revering it not only as a relic, but also as a magical talisman. Deekes claimed that if you take the skull, squeeze it tightly in your hands and, looking into its eyes, say what you want, it will definitely come true. This is how the respectable and wealthy Deekes said that he achieved almost everything. 3 years after this conversation, Deekes died, and the skull mysteriously disappeared. Remember the very first story? In 1943, the Germans tried to steal the skull from a Brazilian museum. The Germans hunted for these skulls all over the world, and, as it turned out later, quite successfully. In 2011, the last, 13th skull was discovered in Bavaria. Swiss journalist Luke Bergen reported that the skull was found in the attic of one of Himmler's former informants. The artifact was hidden in a secret compartment in old wooden windows. There it was kept in a heavily worn leather backpack. A Nazi list of hidden rarities. The 4-page document names 35 valuable art treasures. Item 14 of the document states, Crystal Skull. Rana Collection. Leather case, Crystal Skull, South America. According to the list, the skull belonged to the German explorer Otto. The scientist participated in the Nazi expedition sent in search of the Holy Grail in 1939. He was killed under mysterious circumstances. In the 1980s, the controversy surrounding the skulls flared up with renewed vigor. Mitchell Hayes determined the age of his find at 3,600 years. Professor de Stilberger of the Vienna Museum of Art and History, after his research in 1982, declared the skull a fake. It has no connection with May or Estacom. However, he noted that the artifact was so well made that its creators clearly surpassed the famous Florentine craftsmen in skill. Soon, another receipt fell into the professor's hands. This one was purchased by the Dutch collector Van Ditten in Guatemala. Made of smoky quartz. And then the professor suddenly changes his mind. It makes no sense for a forger to do such difficult work. To polish the stone by hand for years. I can't explain why it looks so natural. Almost like a real European skull, although it is narrower and polished with means unknown to us. It's unlikely that it would be possible to determine the treatment from this object. Besides, it lay in the ground for quite a long time. There's a phenomenon called the Great Unconformity. The fact is that 1 billion years have disappeared from the history of our planet, and we don't know where. We know perfectly well what happened on the planet 500 million years ago and 1.5 billion. But what happened on the planet 1 billion years ago, we have no idea. The fact is that geologists study the history of the planet through soil research. And one of the best places to do this is the Grand Canyon. In the United States of America, all the layers are clearly visible in giant faults, and the entire history of our planet can be studied. In the soil, information about nature, living creatures, and plants is captured. In 1869, John Wesley Powell went to the canyon and began his calculations. It is believed that he once sat in a granny before the cliff and made calculations. He determined that, given the age of the earth and the ancient rocks at the bottom of the canyon, the cliff should be approximately 3 kilometers high, but in front of it there was only 152 meters, where the land disappeared. That is, there really were ancient rocks at the bottom, younger rocks at the top, and nothing in the middle. The rocks that should have told us about 30% of the life on our planet were missing. The Earth simply disappeared. 100 years before John Wesley Powell, James Hooton observed exactly the same thing in Scotland. Then, near Las Vegas, it was calculated that rocks 520 million years old rest on rocks that are 1.5 billion years old. And this discrepancy was observed practically all over the planet. There are several explanations. One of them is that the Earth was covered in ice, which then melted. Some say that the movement of tectonic plates has destroyed rocks all over the planet, but the fact remains. We still can't say for sure where 1 billion years of our planet's history went. So, for 100 years, various collectors, researchers, secret orders, and even the state have been hunting for crystal skulls. According to legend, the powers and knowledge they can grant to humanity are incredible. Today, the world knows of 13 crystal skulls. 9 of them are kept in private collections. 4 crystal skulls are on display at the National Museum of Natural History, as well as at the Museum of Primitive Art in Paris and the British Museum in London. We've heard the legends and myths about skulls. So, what does the scientific community actually say? It says that perhaps the most ordinary greed led to one of the largest scams of the 20th century. 1992, Smithsonian Institute. A milky white skull from the Mining Institute was delivered here. Crystal. It was delivered anonymously. There was only a note nearby. This skull from the stacks was purchased in Mexico in 1960, and scientists finally began to study it. Dr. Walsh conducted the research. One of the first things he noticed were the stylistic differences between the crystal skulls and the skulls depicted on Mayan pyramids. Skulls were indeed common among the Maya, but they were almost always carved from basalt and carved rather crudely. There is no evidence that the Maya actually created crystal skulls. None. Usually, the antiquity of finds is determined by radiocarbon dating, but there is one very major drawback. This method cannot date quartz. And instead, other forms of analysis were used. First, it was quickly determined where this quartz came from. Either Brazil or Madagascar. This means that the skulls were not made in Mexico. The skulls are indeed very old, but not as old as we are told. Crystal skulls have been known in Europe since the second half of the 19th century. Europeans learned about them thanks to Eugene Bobbin, the official archaeologist at the court of the Mexican Emperor Maximilian. Returning to France from South America, he opened an antique shop in Paris. It displayed pre-Columbian artifacts, including crystal skulls. At first small, then larger and larger. Where did Bobbin get these skulls? He bought them. In 1878, Bobbin bought a 10-centimeter tall skull with a hole drilled in it. He bought it from the French ethnographer Alphonse Pinard. This skull is now kept in a Parisian museum. Then life-size skulls without holes began to appear. The most famous of these is kept in the British Museum. It is believed that it was discovered in 1889 by one of Emperor Maximilian's soldiers, but the skull itself was already on sale in Bobbin's shop in 1981. He marketed it as a unique masterpiece of lapidary technology, but was unable to sell it, and in 1985 he took it away. With him to Mexico. A year later, he traveled to New York, where the artifact was purchased by the Tiffany Co. Company. From there, in 1898, the artifact arrived at the British Museum. In the 20th century, skulls circulated in Central and South America, Asia, and Europe. Some are made of rose quartz obsidian. One of them, Darth Vader, served as the model for the character. The exact number of skulls in the world is difficult to determine. However, it is already clear that there are more than 13. According to some sources, 21, according to others, 49. But are any of them real? First, researchers began studying the British skull. It is indeed made of Brazilian crystal. This means it may never have even been to Mexico. After examination, traces of a jeweler's wheel and other 19th century tools were found on it. Then, the same was found on the Parisian brow. Judging by everything, these are 19th century pieces. Incredibly intricate, incredibly beautiful. We really don't know who made them, but it was definitely someone who lived in the 19th century. Specifically, Eugene Bobbin, in an attempt to sell them, told stories about Maya, Aztecs, and some incredible story. Bobbin simply wanted to make money. Perhaps some of the early skulls were indeed Mexican, made for the Day of the Dead celebration. However, most were definitely made in Europe, particularly Germany, where Brazilian crystal was imported in the 19th century. Sinister artifacts always corresponded to European perceptions of the Maya, and scammers exploited this. However, the biggest scam was perpetrated by Anna Mitchell Hedges, the daughter of that very same person. And who was he? Russian epigraphy specialist Maya Ebelev claims Mitchell Hedges was never a renowned archaeologist. It wasn't he who discovered Lubadan, the ancient Maya city, but his friend Thomas Hahn. In 1924, Hahn revisited the city. A so-called explorer, Mitchell Hedges, followed him to wander the ruins. To take this photograph, Mitchell Hedges forced workers to build a wall on one of the terraces to create a more impressive photo. He was a wealthy, charismatic man, an athlete, and a fisherman. Apparently, in pursuit of fame, he told everyone that he had discovered this city. This was not true. Moreover, both he and his daughter Anna often confused their stories later. They constantly gave different years: 1924, 1925, 1926. And the year his daughter found the skull, Mitchell Hedges wasn't even in Mexico. Interestingly, the excavation logs kept by the archaeologists have survived. And no one confirmed Anna's story, which simply couldn't have happened. Anna made up the story about the skull. That very skull of fate actually appeared in the 1930s. In 1933, it was acquired by the London art dealer Sidney Barney. And 10 years later, Mitchell Hedges bought it at Sotheby's. There's even a letter from a guy from 1933 that mentions the skull. The crystal skull belonged to the collector I bought it from for several years. He, in turn, acquired it from an Englishman, whose collection it remained in for several years. I couldn't find anything else. Besides its archaeological value, it's a true work of art. Even the price for the skull is listed, £1,000. Mitchell Hedges, on the other hand, didn't write anything about the skull until the 1950s. How could that be? How could he find a skull from the ancient Mayan civilization and not tell anyone? He claimed he had reasons for keeping quiet about how the skull came to be in his possession. In fact, Anna made up the story, and Frank Dorland was the co-author of the scam. He spread the legend of its supernatural properties. He did indeed give the skull to Hewlett-Packard. But what did they really say? The skull was immersed in liquid and examined under polarized light. In conclusion, it really is a single piece of crystal. And the jaws are also made from the same piece. One of our guys joked that he could reproduce the skull if he was given a year and $100,000. So, basically, it's an impossible task. They did say that it was truly a work of art. A very fine work by an incredible master, but not ancient Mayan. When, many years later, Ani was told that her father had bought the skull at auction, she didn't hesitate and responded. Her father gave the artifact to his friend, Sidney Barney, for safekeeping, and he, for some unknown reason, put it up for auction. And Mitchell Hedges had to buy back his property. Anna inherited the skull from her father and made money from this story for many years. She displayed the artifact for money. He was very reluctant to let serious students handle it. And one day, the art historian de Stilberger and archaeologist Hammond noticed that the holes in the lower jaw had been made with a metal drill. After that, Anna refused to show the skull to scientists. An examination of the skull under a scanning electron microscope took place 3 years after Anna's death. It was once again confirmed that the skull was relatively recent, crafted using modern cutting tools. A Czech craftsman, Dave Schlechte, carved a similar skull in his workshop in 1984. He donated it to the Museum of Records. Every story about the skull only fueled interest and, consequently, brought in money for its owners. It is said that even museums, aware that the skulls were fake, exhibited them falsely to attract attention. Moreover, even the legend of the goddess of death's skulls was fabricated. Yuri Norisov was engaged in a literal translation of the Maya manuscript, but he found nothing of the sort in it. Incidentally, an interesting fact, in the 15th century, one of the Maya islands, Cozumel, became a haven for Caribbean pirates. On this island stood an ancient temple, decorated with skulls and 2 crossed bones beneath. It was this Mayan symbol that the pirates took for their flag. So, the Jolly Roger pirate flag is actually ancient Mayan symbolism. The world still hasn't forgotten the crystal skulls. they still excite the minds and inspire millions of people. The skulls are truly beautiful work, made with a rotary cutter. Most likely, in Europe, in Orstein, the British Museum eventually acknowledged that they were a 19th century piece. Only a few questions remain unanswered. The author of the first skulls never came forward. We truly don't know who made them or where. And if these skulls are fakes, maybe there were real ones, based on whose inspiration they were made. Have you ever felt such a strange feeling of emptiness? This faith in some skulls, in aliens, in all this, it's as if this faith very successfully covers up our emptiness. It feels like always, at all times, people needed to believe in something like this. Why? So that